with a flick of the wrist. I love it! I love it! I love it! Welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live on a pair of classic old wooden motor cruisers here in Victoria, British Columbia, along with my lovely girlfriend and the loving memory of my pup Geordie, all while fixing them both up for some pretty ambitious cruising. Okay then, well, for those of you who've been following along, we would normally be carrying on in the forecastle here, wouldn't we? But we're not going to. And I'll explain why. And well, that was because early in the week I went up to Genoa to get the last few things out of the shed, including this dinghy. And well, I put my back out quite badly. And no, I didn't do it putting this dinghy on the back of the truck. No, that would sort of seem sensible. What I did was open the hood to check the oil, and my back went pow, and I collapsed in a little puddle. And just getting around and staying upright has been very difficult since. But there's lots I can get done on Pome this week, and that's going quite well. Mostly electrical. All right then, I've collected a backpack worth of electrical supplies from MV Geordie, walked back over to Pome, and have a very pleasant week tinkering with some much overdue wiring projects. Okay then, back aboard cozy little Pome, and a project that, well, as many seem to be, I've been both dreading and looking forward to for quite some time. I've been following along. You remember me building this little shelf, which has been enormously handy. For the purposes of filming, I have emptied it of all the stuff that Andrea and I normally keep on here. Anyway, makes it a little tidier for this. But what this has done, and in this lighting you can sort of see what happens, it creates a shadow from this fine strip lighting up here on the workspace, and I think it would be kind of neat to have some lighting under here. So if you remember, as I was building this, I discussed putting a strip light in underneath here that I think would be just lovely for the galley, you know, just turn it on by itself in the evening for mixing drinks, etc. Anyway, that's part of today's project, and I'm going to use this strip lighting. Now this is an interesting type of strip lighting. It's called COB or chip on board. If you look at the strip, it's one continuous orangey yellow strip of little LEDs. Now to be fair, they are individual LEDs, except they're so close together you can hardly tell. Now if you look at the LEDs that I put in here, you can see individual dots, right? Because if you look up underneath, you can see the individual LEDs that create that light. So the strip lighting effect is relatively good, but in some cases like this, it's not perfect. Whereas this lighting, as you can see, is completely uniform, and that's because it was done later with a COB strip light. Anyway, these COB strip lights were gifted to me through the Amazon wish list, and I'm going to say they're absolutely fantastic. They're the nicest, warmest, just greatest strip lighting I've ever seen. Anyway, I'll put a link down below for them. And I'm going to control those with this very lovely little dimmable switch. It's a tiny little rotating switch that goes from off, click as you turn it on, and to bright and back. It is a beautifully made potted, and what that means is that they've filled the entire switch with an epoxy type material, so it's completely impervious to water. It comes either with a black or a silver little knob, and again I will put a link to this little switch down below, and if it is half as nice as I believe it is amongst the nicest little switches I've ever seen. Okay, now where is it gonna go? Oh boy. Originally, I thought it was absolutely essential that this little switch would be tucked in under here and would be very discreet. You'd simply come along and know where it was, flick it on, and it's really, really nice. Well, there's some reason that's a good idea and some reason it's not. The other option might be right here. Well, that is also reasonably discreet, and I can tell you, from a construction point of view, this is much, much simpler. In fact, there's a void behind here and I can get at it really easily. Back here, it gets seriously awkward because at that level, it is now well into this bulkhead. Oh, disregard these dusty fingerprints. Anyway, whereas up here, there's going to be a plinth here eventually, or some people might call it a bulkhead. Which on a boat means a different thing altogether. Anyway, that's going to have some puck light reading lights under here, so there'll be wiring under here. So in many ways, up here is a lot simpler. So sometime between this moment right here and 2 minutes from now, when you watch me install it, I'm going to decide. Yes, indeed. Frida is keeping me company today while Andrea is off doing a little bit of a research project. For those of you who remember from when Frida first came into my life, we didn't get along all that well then, but we get along like best friends now, especially when Andrea's not around. Okay, so in the many minutes that's elapsed since we spoke last, I have decided to opt for the stealth positioning for the switch right up in here. And part of the reason is that I discovered that the bulkhead is thick enough because of the various materials that make it up, that actually I can get the switch to fit behind this veneer of mahogany, and wires can chase up behind without it actually coming through or causing any damage here. The only problem is I have to be able to peel it off to do all that. And, well, that's not really a big deal. Okay, well, let's put a little blanket over here because I'm going to be drilling here in a moment. In the meantime, those of you who know how I assemble stuff like this piece of strip right here is affixed with some tiny 23 gauge stainless steel pins, and it should just peel right off. Largely. There we go. Nothing to it. Likewise, this strip that separates the wall panels. Now this one doesn't have to come all the way off, just far enough that I can start to peel this off. I don't have appropriate tools here. Frida is certainly settling in for the long haul. Okay, so nothing like a little fork to help you get this off. There we go. Peel this back about that far. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. Okay, now I gotta peel this back. Again, using the fork technique. There we go. And now it's far enough that I can, no further than required here, Peter. Oh, it turns out I actually used some adhesive here. Well, I'll have to put some more adhesive back when I put it. So the actual bulkhead is made with a horizontal strip and then a vertical strip or section of tongue and groove V-joint, which I veneered over with this mahogany when I did all this. So I'm going to drill a big hole here, a little hole here, and we're underway. So I'm going to begin by drilling a pilot hole through from this side, basically where I'd like the switch to be, which is basically right there. And as a result, I'll drill my hole right here. There we go. All right, this next step is a bit savage, and I'm sure Frida will think so as well. It's to use this Forstner bit to plow right through the two sections of V-joint, but not through the mahogany plywood veneer on the other side, so that I have a nice thin layer to put the switch on. This is going to be a lot of chips, and the problem is many of them are going to fall down in here, so I'll have to be able to vacuum them. Anyway, whatever. That's through one layer. And let's see, I must be getting close. What I'm going to do is actually just drill the hole in the end for the correct size hole for the switch, and see if it protrudes far enough as it is, because it will plow right through that veneer plywood very quickly, and then, well, then I'll cry. Okay, so if I send the switch through, it doesn't quite come through far enough, so I'm gonna have to work with that Forstner bit just a bit more. You're like a cat sitting in the sun, you. Okay. And that's all I needed. Gosh, this is a lovely switch. All right. Get that good and tight, because I'm not going to be able to service this very easily in the future. Excellent. And the knob just presses on. There we go. I love it. Click on, brighter, dimmer. I want to send out another really big thank you to Patrick Hotra who sent along this fantastic 12-volt circulation pump, which will be the main circulation pump for the entire hydronic heating system aboard Geordie. And in fact, Patrick, I apologize tremendously. You said this to me months ago, and we promptly lost it. Anyway, it's been found and it's been played with and tested. My gosh, this thing pumps a lot of water. I'll put a link down below if you're interested in the absolute premiere. This is a magnetic drive, no seal circulation pump for a hydronic system. It's just a lovely pump. Thank you ever so much, Patrick, for the Johnson water pump. Okay, now we have to do a little more creative cutting. I don't know if you can see the little trough right here that the light strip is actually going to sit in. And well, it's going to end right here. And now that's where the wire will be. So somehow I have to get a route from here to here. And well, that's simply drilling a hole, is it not? That worked brilliantly. And now we just have to be able to get both of these sets of wires up high enough that it's up into the future lighting bulkhead so I can wire them up in time here. Okay, and the easiest way I can think of doing that is by cutting a trough with my fine tool. And there you go, two tidy little wiring troughs. Okay, so the next step is definitely going to be to install the light strips that all the wires are present for that connection. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment to thank Somer for coming aboard as a new crew member via Patreon. Thank you ever so much, Somer. We really, really appreciate it. Okay, this is always a little more frustrating than it seems. Okay, now all light strips can be cut at intervals, usually roughly an inch here, and you can see the little brass strips, or at least the connectors, where it is possible to make connection at any module of 1 inch. And you get these little plastic clips that clip in there with little teeth that make contact in those little contact strips. Well, to tell you the truth, I've never had 100% success with those. My solution is to cut them, clean these because I find they have a little bit of varnish on them, and then solder directly to them. Now I have the advantage in this case, this is a brand new spool, so I'm just going to use the factory connected wire, and then next time I need something off this spool, I'll have to make that connection. The factory wire comes with one of these proprietary, or although they're fairly common in the low voltage lighting world, little coaxial type connectors, but I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to cut it off and strip the wires inside. Now, I don't seem to have my Olfa blade with me at the moment, so I'm going to do this with this razor, such as the circumstances of having tools in too many different places. Easily done, and then of course inside it's just a regular strip. And there we go. Okay, so the absolute most brilliant way to do this may be eluding me, because of course this little slot goes above these brackets, and taking the adhesive strip off, and you know what I mean? Okay, so what I'm going to do is basically just feed it through while I still have the adhesive strip on, and deal with figuring out how to get the adhesive strip off at a later moment. Okay, let's just get this through here, over each bracket. Be nice to add some light under here. And there we go. So I'm going to pull it back so it's positioned roughly where I believe I want it to end. Hold the strip in place, work my way around the other way, putting my finger on where it would come out. And this is where I want to cut it. Now, the old style of LED strips where you can see the individual strips. It's very clear where you can cut it. If I read the manual, it would probably tell me, but I happen to know I can safely cut it right through the connection point, giving me a module of roughly an inch. Okay, now if I was prudent, I would test this before I installed it any further. So I'm going to set up the power wire that's going to feed it on the other side and just give it a quick test. And again, on boats, I much prefer using the modern, what's considered safety wire. So red and yellow rather than red and black. The idea being AC 110 wire is white, green, and black. Therefore, the only black on the boat will be for the AC circuit. Any yellow, you know, is 12 volt ground. And if you're not familiar with marine wire, you'll notice that this wire is silver colored rather than copper colored. Well, it is indeed copper wire, but it is tinned the entire length of every single strand with tin, or anyways, we say tin, but I'm not actually sure what material it is. The point is, it removes the possibility of that horrible corrosion that you sometimes get with wire, where water can creep up under the insulation and you just keep stripping it away and it's green for as far as you can go. This stuff is fantastic. Of course, it does represent a significantly higher cost. We're currently getting something of a rain squall, even though it's sunny. This week has been quite extraordinary for weather, especially wind on this coast. In fact, you may have even seen it in the news. We got not one, but two, what they're calling bomb cyclones. Absolutely huge winds that wreck pretty big havoc, at least on the outer coast and the south coast of Vancouver Island, and I know as far down into Washington State. Thankfully here in Victoria we were largely spared by the brutality of that wind, both here on Palm and at Geordie at the other marina. I checked on both through the night and we were just fine. Okay, Andrea's out walking without an umbrella. She'll find shelter somewhere. This town is full of little cafes. Okay, I've run a circuit. Let's do a little test. Okay, ground to ground, and oh yes, excellent. So everything is still operational. Something you might want to know about LEDs, they are diodes, and diodes in fact are like the one-way valve of the electrical world. They'll only work in one direction, unlike an incandescent bulb. Most of you will know this, but if you're unfamiliar with it and you do a test and they don't seem to be working, swap your leads, because they won't work if you get the polarity wrong, and you might think for some reason they're not working, but they're just fine, they're just backwards. Okay, let's carry on. Okie dokie. So I'll pull that through so I can get it on the other side. Okay, and send these wires up through. I want this to be as far forward in this trough as possible so that it will shed light down across the mahogany here as nicely as possible. So I'll pull that up to there. And you don't get too many repositioning chances with this sort of stuff. There we go. There we go. Okay then, well, with that reasonably well aligned, let's move back here and start looking at making some connections. The first thing I'm going to do is actually cut out the top corner of this panel so that I can actually do that up in this little void. Okay, so now I just have to put the wires in these troughs that I've made, tape them in so they stay in. And press my panel back in place. Excellent. And as for the wiring, it's relatively straightforward. Again, using quality crimp connectors. One thing that's a little unusual about it is that the switch actually controls the ground side of the circuit, which to me is not intuitive, but that's no trouble at all. In fact, it's all perfectly clear in the instructions. Okay. And there we go. So let's throw in some P-clips to make this all nice and tidy. This wire will be in use again shortly because it's a main lighting circuit feed, and it will be used for the puck lights that are coming under here in a subsequent project. Excuse me, Frida. Oh, I can tell you, this is hard on the back. And lastly, just to replace this strip, which magically, because the nails are headless, just act as pins back into the piece and are pretty much, there we go, as secure as they ever were. Love it. I thought I would wait until it was a little bit darker before I showed off the final result. So it's a pleasant place to begin with, but with a flick of the wrist. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And if you love it, how about considering subscribing to the show? We'd really appreciate it. And of course, if you love it, how about giving it a big old thumbs up or a recommendation to that friend of yours who may also love it. And if you love it as much as I hope you do, please consider supporting the show through Patreon or PayPal. Links are down below. Thanks ever so much.